have been in rooms full of people and felt completely alone. You have been part of groups, friendships, families, and communities, and still felt like a guest who never quite received a permanent invitation. You smile, you participate, you say the right things. But underneath there is a quiet, persistent feeling that everyone else received an instruction manual for belonging that you never got. It is not loneliness exactly. You can be surrounded by people who love you and still feel it. It is not depression, although it looks like it from certain angles. And it is not social anxiety, because you are perfectly capable of being around people. You just feel like an outsider no matter where you are. At the family dinner table, you feel like you are observing rather than participating. In your friend group, you feel like the one who could disappear without anyone noticing. At work, you feel like everyone shares an unspoken bond that somehow excludes you. And online, you scroll through communities and conversations and think, these people have something I do not have. If this resonates with something inside you, something you have never been able to put into words, then this is not coincidence. This feeling has a name. It has a cause, and it has roots that go far deeper than your current social life. This is the psychology of people who feel like they do not belong anywhere. The feeling of not belonging is one of the most universal human experiences, and simultaneously one of the most isolating. Because by its very nature, it convinces you that you are the only one feeling it. But you are not. Research from the American Psychological Association consistently ranks the need to belong among the most fundamental human motivations, alongside the need for safety and the need for sustenance. Psychologist Abraham Maslow placed belongingness in the middle of his hierarchy of needs, between physical safety and self-esteem. And when that need goes unmet, the psychological consequences are as real as hunger or cold. A landmark study published in the journal Psychological Bulletin found that perceived lack of belonging is associated with increased rates of anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and physical health decline. The researchers noted that social exclusion activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. In other words, when you feel like you do not belong, your brain processes it as actual injury. But here is the part most people miss. The feeling of not belonging is often not about the environment. It is about the self. Many people who feel like outsiders are surrounded by people who welcome them, include them, and care about them. The exclusion is not coming from the outside. It is coming from the inside. There is an internal filter that rejects evidence of inclusion and amplifies evidence of difference. This is not paranoia. It is not ingratitude. It is a deeply embedded psychological pattern, usually formed in childhood, that tells you you are fundamentally different from other people, and that difference makes you unwelcome. And once this belief system is in place, no amount of external belonging can override it, because the barrier is not between you and the world. The barrier is between you and your own sense of worthiness. The origins of chronic non-belonging are varied, but they share a common thread. At some critical point in development, the person received the message that who they authentically are is not compatible with the group they need to belong to. For some, this happened in the family. They were the sensitive child in a family that valued toughness, the creative child in a family that valued practicality, the introverted child in a family of extroverts, the child who questioned everything in a family that demanded obedience. And because the family is a child's first world, being different in the family feels like being different in the universe. For others, it happened at school. They were bullied, excluded, or marginalized during the years when social identity is forming. And the brain of a child does not have the cognitive sophistication to say, "Those kids were cruel, and it says nothing about me." Instead, the brain concludes, "I was excluded because something about me is wrong." And that conclusion becomes a foundational belief that survives into adulthood. For some, the origin is cultural or geographic dislocation. Children of immigrants who feel too foreign for the new country and too changed for the old one. Third culture kids who grew up everywhere and belong nowhere. Families that moved frequently, uprooting the child from every social foundation before it could solidify. And for others, the feeling of not belonging comes from being psychologically ahead of or behind their peers. Children who were intellectually gifted often report chronic alienation because their interests, vocabulary, and emotional depth did not match those of their age group. They could not connect because they were operating at a different frequency. And rather than adjusting the frequency, the world told them they were the problem. Regardless of the specific origin, the result is the same. The child develops what psychologists call a schema of defectiveness or social undesirability. This is a core belief, usually unconscious, that says there is something fundamentally wrong with me that makes me incompatible with others. And this schema acts as a filter through which all social experiences are processed. Invitations are seen as politeness, not genuine desire. Compliments are dismissed as misperceptions. And moments of genuine connection are reframed as temporary exceptions to the rule that you do not truly fit. People who feel like they do not belong anywhere exhibit a series of patterns that maintain the very isolation they are trying to escape. The first is preemptive withdrawal. Rather than risk the pain of being excluded, they exclude themselves first. They decline invitations. They sit at the edge of groups. They leave events early. And they interpret their own withdrawal as proof that they were not meant to be there in the first place, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. The second is hypervigilant social comparison. They are constantly scanning for evidence that they are different. They notice when other people in a group share an inside joke they do not understand. They notice when someone else is greeted more warmly. They track the microdynamics of every social interaction, not to be controlling, but because their survival system is searching for confirmation of the belief they already hold. I do not fit. The third is identity fragmentation. Because they have never felt fully accepted as their authentic self, they develop different versions of themselves for different contexts. One version for work, another for family, another for friends. And none of these versions feels entirely real. They are adaptations, not expressions. And the person behind the adaptations feels increasingly invisible. The fourth is the outsider identity. Over time, the feeling of not belonging becomes an identity in itself. They begin to define themselves as the one who does not fit. And while this identity provides a sense of coherence, it also becomes a prison. Because now, even when belonging is offered, accepting it would require abandoning the only identity they have. The fifth is the search and abandon cycle. They are drawn to new communities, new groups, new relationships, hoping that this time it will be different. And for a while, it is. The novelty provides a temporary sense of connection. But eventually, the old feeling returns. The filter reactivates, and they leave, concluding once again that they do not belong, without realizing that the feeling follows them because it lives inside them, not in the group. The scientific literature on belonging and exclusion is both extensive and sobering. Social neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA conducted landmark research using functional MRI showing that social exclusion activates the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula, at the same brain regions that process physical pain. Her study demonstrated that the human brain does not distinguish between a broken bone and a broken social bond. Both register as injury. Research published in the journal Current Directions in Psychological Science found that the need to belong is so fundamental that even brief, minimal experiences of exclusion, such as being ignored in a virtual ball-tossing game, produce measurable drops in self-esteem, meaningful existence, sense of control, and mood. These effects occurred within minutes and persisted even when participants were told the exclusion was random and not personal. A longitudinal study from the University of Chicago found that chronic loneliness and perceived non-belonging predicted cognitive decline, immune system suppression, and increased mortality risk. The researchers concluded that social disconnection is as significant a health risk as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Research on schema therapy, developed by psychologist Jeffrey Young, has identified the defectiveness schema and the social isolation schema as two of the most treatment-resistant core beliefs. These schemas form early, operate automatically, and actively distort the perception of social reality, causing the individual to dismiss evidence of belonging and amplify evidence of exclusion. The research paints a clear picture. The feeling of not belonging is not a mood. It is a neurologically encoded belief system with measurable consequences for mental and physical health. And it requires deliberate, targeted intervention to change. Let us talk about the moment you feel it most clearly. It is the moment at a gathering when everyone else seems to be having a conversation that flows naturally, and you are calculating your next sentence. It is the moment when laughter erupts and you join in half a second late because you were busy wondering if you were supposed to laugh. It is the look you give yourself in the bathroom mirror at a party, the look that says, "What are you doing here?" It is scrolling through social media and seeing friends together without you and feeling a sting that is entirely disproportionate to the situation, but completely proportionate to the wound it touches. It is listening to people talk about their childhood friendships, their college experiences, their tightly bonded families, and feeling like they are describing a planet you have never visited. It is the effort, the exhausting, a constant effort of trying to belong, of studying people, of mimicking behavior, of performing a version of yourself that might be acceptable, and then going home and feeling more alone than ever because the person who was accepted was not really you. And the most painful version is this. It is sitting with people who genuinely love you, people who have chosen you, people who would be hurt to know you feel this way, and still feeling the gap, still feeling the glass between you and them, still hearing the voice that says they do not really know you, and if they did, they would not stay. That voice is not telling the truth, but it has been speaking for so long that it sounds like the truth. And distinguishing between the voice and reality is the central challenge of healing. The world tells people who feel like outsiders to put themselves out there more, to join groups, to be more social. And while increased social contact can help, it fundamentally misunderstands the problem. The problem is not a lack of social opportunity. The problem is a core belief that corrupts every social opportunity. You can put a person who believes they do not belong into the most welcoming group on earth, and they will still find a reason to feel excluded. Because the exclusion is not in the room, it is in the belief system. The world also assumes that belonging is binary, that you either belong or you do not. But belonging exists on a spectrum, and for most people who struggle with it, the issue is not total exclusion. It is partial belonging. They feel 70% included, but fixate on the missing 30%. They are close to connection, but never quite arrive. And perhaps the most damaging misunderstanding is the idea that if you have not found where you belong, you simply have not looked hard enough. This places the burden entirely on the individual and ignores the psychological reality that the barrier to belonging is often internal, not external. The person is not looking in the wrong places. They are looking through the wrong lens. If you have spent your life searching for a place where you belong, here is a perspective that might change everything. You are not supposed to belong everywhere. You are supposed to belong with yourself first. The reason external belonging never feels complete is that internal belonging is missing. You have not yet fully accepted who you are. And until you do, no group, no community, no relationship will fill the gap because the gap is between you and yourself. Start by identifying the specific ways you are different and, instead of treating them as liabilities, reframe them as features. You notice things others miss. You think at a depth others do not reach. You process the world through a filter that is rare. These are not reasons for exclusion. They are reasons for a different kind of belonging, one that is smaller, deeper, and more meaningful. Practice what therapists call dropping the rope. Stop trying to force belonging. Stop performing. Stop adapting. Show up as yourself, without apology, without modification, and see who stays. The people who stay are your people. And finally, consider that the very quality that makes you feel like you do not belong, your awareness of the gap, your sensitivity to difference is the same quality that allows you to connect with others who feel the same way. You do not belong in the mainstream. You belong in the margins. And the margins are where the most interesting people have always been. If this reached you in a moment where you feel like you are standing outside a window, looking into a room you were never invited to enter, I want you to know something. The room is not the goal. You are. You have spent your life trying to fit into spaces that were not designed for you. And every time you failed, you blamed yourself. But the truth is, you were never meant to fit. You were meant to build, to create a space that fits you, and then to invite others who understand what it feels like to be on the outside. Because here is the secret no one tells you. Every person who has ever changed the world, every artist, thinker, creator, and innovator was someone who did not belong. They did not fit the mold. And instead of shrinking to match it, they broke the mold and built something new. You are not broken because you do not belong. You are rare, and rare things do not fit in common places. This is Unspoken Minds. And if you have never felt like you belonged anywhere before, you belong here.